Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Deep Threads, the Deep Threads podcast. I'm your recovering journalist and host, Dean Balsamini, coming to you from the cozy confines of Cedar Bean's Coffee Joint in the great state of New Jersey. Tonight, I'm delighted to have as my guest the eminent Major League Baseball umpire Phil Cuzzi, who had an outstanding career lasting nearly 3 decades in the majors and an incredible journey. And he retired as the oldest umpire at age 70. And he just hung up his mask February 20th, was it, Phil?
Actually, the day after Christmas is when I notified the office that I was wishing them a Merry Christmas and also decided to retire.
Okay, what made you retire? And also, are you getting a little antsy that the season is upon us and you're not going to be umpiring this year?
Well, I went back and forth with it for a while, Dean, and I mean, I turned 70 at the end of the season last year, so I did become, to my surprise, the oldest active umpire of all time. And that had nothing to do with it, really, because I felt as though I could still keep going. But I said, I'm 70, and I should probably spend some time at home with my family. So I went back and forth, and then I decided to pull the trigger, and so I retired, and I'm not antsy yet. Now, if you want to ask me in June, July, I might feel differently, but I haven't really seen any spring training games. We have the World Baseball Classic going on now. I haven't seen any of that. I did hear that the Italian team beat the USA yesterday, although I didn't see any of it. So, not that I guess, not that I ever really cared. Of course, we always root for Team USA, but if anyone's going to beat them, why not the Italians?
Well, it was kind of funny. It was on the internet today, or it was that on social media, was that apparently DeRosa didn't start his best, thinking they had clinched, and they were down 8-0 before they got the memo.
I heard only on the radio I was driving in my car, and I heard like a news story coming up saying what an upset that the Italian team beat the USA, and it seemed to be a mistake on the part of the manager, and that's the first I'm hearing as to actually what the issue was.
The funny thing also is the Italian press was trying to interview a lot of the players. They couldn't speak Italian, so.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
But you've had an incredible journey. I mean, did you always want to be an umpire? Did you want to be a player? I know you excelled in high school.
Well, I think every kid in America wants to be a major league player, right? So I certainly was like every other kid in America that I knew anyway. And I actually went to college to play ball, so that was my motivation for even going to college, and then and I was a catcher, and I think that later helped me as an umpire.
Who are your heroes growing up? Who did you want to emulate?
Well, to really show my age, I would say Mickey Mantle, Roger Maris, back in the day,
right?
And then of course, when I got older and like say in high school, being a catcher, I liked Thurman Munson, of course, and but once I got to college, I blew out my shoulder. I played, just my freshman year, and I said, well, okay, I don't know that I'm going to play anymore, so I'm here. What am I going to do? And so my first job out of college, I was a school teacher in Union, New Jersey, at one of the junior highs there, and loved it. I really enjoyed it. But I didn't. As much as I enjoyed it, I knew I didn't want to do it forever. I was young. I knew at some point I wanted to be married, have a family, and I didn't want to always have to have a summer job. And then, as it turns out, that's what I did. I worked during the summer, but it was just one of those things. I went into sales after leaving teaching, and I said, okay, I'm making more money, which I wanted to do, but it doesn't really excite me. And then it wasn't until I was at Yankee Stadium one night with my buddies, and for whatever the reason, I still don't know, I just started focusing on the umpires, watching them rotate around the field, and I said, now that would be a great job. So I pursued it in that way. One of my buddies said, they have an umpire school, and I looked into it, and I packed up my car, drove down to Florida, and I started my journey, and it was a long
Wow.
journey.
Who were your, before we get into that journey, who were your umpire heroes?
Well, before I really got into it, I didn't know umpires by name even, after I got started, then it was, like the veteran National League guys. I first came up National League. So you're talking about Jerry Crawford, Frank Pulley, Terry Tata, so but, until I got there, I had no idea of, like as a kid saying, oh, Mickey Mantle. I didn't say, oh, Al.
Right.
Yeah. But
And what do you think about what's been happening now with where they're phasing out kind of like the umpires, and now they're going to have what, the automatic system this year? Or are they going to start implementing that?
well,
Did that have anything to do with your decision?
not really, but that really wasn't a part of my decision, but knowing that it was there and going to be the challenge system, which we experimented with last spring training, so I had a taste of it. And the only thing I'll say about that is I'm happy I'm not doing it, because I do feel sorry for our guys. Someone sent me a tape the other day of a pitch, and I didn't know who the umpire was. It looked like a young umpire, and the hitter challenged the pitch, and it turned out to be, he called it a strike at the bottom of the strike zone. It turned out to be like 0.01, in the out of the strike zone, below the line. So, that's, I'm not sure that anybody is that good to be able to tell the difference between 0.01, whether it's a ball or a strike. I know I wasn't good enough to do that. Our young guys are good, but that's kind of like, I'm happy I'm not doing it. I'll just say that.
Well, I'll tell you one play that grinds my gears these days, especially with the replays, is when the player is sliding into second and they've touched the bag and their foot comes off the base for a millisecond, and
Yeah.
the infielder keeps his glove on it, and then they call him out. That's not in the spirit of the game, or even the idea of what replay was supposed to do, in my opinion.
Yeah. To me, I always equated replay. Replay is great for the egregious miss, right? We've seen those, and we know that there's games that have happened, and things that you say, gee whiz, had replay been in effect then, we wouldn't even be talking about it to this day. But I equate it to like a medication. Every medication has a side effect. And the side effect to replay is exactly the play that you just described. Guy hits a double where, as an umpire, I would see the play and make a very casual, safe call, because that's all that it warranted. And then all of a sudden you see the dugout doing this, and you immediately know it's exactly the play that you described. He came off, and when he slid into the base, he popped off the ground this much for that long, more than what the naked eye is going to see in real time, and of course it has to be overturned. And that the horse is out of the barn with that, and that's just
And physically, that's really almost so you don't break your ankle or snap your ankle or get hurt. I mean, the spirit of the game. I mean, look at where we went from the neighborhood play, where some of that got out of hand for a little bit, to this. There's got to be a happy medium to the spirit of, like you said about the strike before, about the low strike zone, the high strike zone. A quarter of an inch or anything. That's not what these rules were made for. That's not what it was supposed. And I think that also is sucking the life out of our ball game.
Well, what I think is going to happen, and it's only my opinion, doesn't make me right. I certainly have been wrong before, but I think that the challenge system will eventually come to the full ABS. And I think the reason that that's going to happen is there's going to be a team that is going to, they get two challenges a game. As long as if they're right, they continue going, right? Just like challenging a play on the bases, defensively. And I think a team is going to be out of challenges early in the game, and in the eighth inning, a game may be decided on a pitch that they can no longer challenge. So then people are going to say, be it the media, be it the players, the owners, they're going to say, well, we have this system, why don't we just use it? And I think eventually it may happen for that reason. The other thing is, I think that it's going to increase game times. MLB works so hard to chop time, off the game, game time, and until we had a clock, which initially, I consider myself a purist of the game, I said we're the only sport that never had a clock. Well, now we're gonna have a clock. But then I realized after living it that it really was like seeing the clips that we used to watch from the '60s, because pitcher would get the ball and throw, and he had 30 seconds for the 25 seconds. He had to do that. Chopped a half hour off game time, which was fantastic. I mean, good for everybody. And I think that now, I think there's going to be more walks because the hitters are good, and there's going to be growing pains to this challenge system and the ABS if and when it goes full bore. But the hitters are going to be good. So when you played Little League Baseball, what were you taught? Well, if the pitch is close with 2 strikes, you better foul it off. You better swing. You better if
Right, you got to protect yourself.
At least foul it off. They're going to realize these guys are going to be good enough to know that if the pitch is an inch inside or off the plate, they don't have to swing at it because even if the umpire calls it, they can challenge it and it's going to be corrected if the umpire in fact was wrong. My 2 cents is I think it's going to increase game time, and I think eventually they're going to go to the full ABS.
I see. I just don't like the human element being taken away. I loved some of those arguments, and even whether it be a Lou Piniella or an Earl Weaver or a Billy Martin, and then the umpires getting involved and giving it back. And in recent years, you've seen the Aaron Boone situations and things like that. You've had your share of run-ins. How much of them are that hot in the moment? Or is there certain in real time what line you're going to cross and what line you're not? Or how much do you give the different managers different lines that they can cross? Did you treat them differently?
No, the line is the same. And, people think that the line is if they curse at you. And, if they curse at me, making it personal, that they've stepped over the line. People think that the magic word is the F word, and it's not the F word, depending how he uses it. But the magic word, believe it or not, is you or your, because anything he says after you or your is probably not going to be good, and it's going to be personal. And that would be the line. But no, the line for us is the same.
Remember, I think it was Red Sox A's. I happened to be at the Oakland Alameda Coliseum for the playoff game where Clemens got tossed. And some CBS guys told us the magic word was MF that Clemens flipped, and they tossed him in that playoff game pretty early.
If he called them that, then absolutely. If he said this MF game is too important, that wouldn't be
right. It's the way you use it.
Locker room talk is locker room talk, but once it's directed towards us, that changes everything.
But look, even how I know it's crazy. It worked out in the Yankees' favor, but like today, the Jeter home run in '96 would have been called back with was it Richie Garcia?
Yes.
But the thing was, it caused so much talk and everything. And it was just part of the game also. And I looked up your umpire stats scores. 94%, I think historically, 94 to 95%, you got correct. A baseball player hits 3 for 10, he makes the Hall of Fame pretty much.
Yeah.
So your odds are, your percentages are pretty good.
Well, I did the best I could. It's a tough job. It's a thankless job. Just go out every day and try to be perfect. And no one is perfect. But it doesn't mean that, there was always an umpire's joke saying that you have to be perfect the first day and then go out and show signs of constant improvement. But, yeah.
Before we go into the specifics and highlights that I wanted to talk about, and it's funny because you also have some really interesting moments, and a bunch of them involve the Dodgers all the time, like really exciting games that you were involved in. If you could tell the audience about your journey, which was not a straight line because you were an umpire, then you weren't, then you were again. And it's a very interesting story.
Yeah. Well, the first thing, the first cluster of challenges was even to get into the game. So the way it works is you go to umpire school. It's different today. It's a little bit different today for the most part. But back then, there were two different schools. You picked one. The top percentage of each school then went to an evaluation program that was then run by the schools were privately owned, but they were accredited for to advance candidates to MLB. So the top percentage of each class would go to this evaluation course. If you were selected to go to that, then you were pretty much assured that you were going to go into the rookie ball, the lowest of the minor leagues, but you'd be into the system. And, I played baseball my whole life. I thought that I knew the game. So I said, well, how hard could this be going to umpire school? Well, we only have time for me to give you the short version, but I went to umpire school the first time, didn't make it, didn't deserve to, frankly. So I had to wait. If you were going to continue with it, you had to wait another year because the school was only offered in January. And I went the second year. So in between times, now keep in mind, I was a tenured school teacher. I worked in sales. Then I go to umpire school, don't make it. So now what am I going to do for the next year until I go back to umpire school? So I did whatever I could. I substitute taught, I bartended, I unloaded trucks, whatever it was, waiting for the next year. I go back, I said, okay, I have a much better feel about what's going on. I went to umpire school a second time, didn't make it. Fast forward, I went a third time, didn't make it. I made it my fourth year, which was 1985. I finally went into the minor leagues, New York Penn League.
Sounds like my driver's ed exams.
Well, I've seen you drive.
Yeah, it's not good.
So once I got into the minor leagues, I was going along pretty well, even though it took me a while to get there. Talk about arriving late at the dance. It's 85. I spent the year in rookie ball. I went to A ball in 86. 87, 88, I was in Double A. I went to Triple A in 89. I also was invited to Winter Ball, which was a huge step. That meant that one of the leagues was interested in you if they sent you to Winter Ball. I went to the Dominican Republic. After that, I was invited. I was seen by. You had to be seen by somebody, right? I was so fortunate to be seen by now Hall of Fame umpire Al Barlick, if you remember that name, old-time blue-collar National League umpire who was a supervisor in the National League. He saw me working one night in Louisville. I had the plate, didn't know he was there. We walk in the locker room, there's Hall of Fame umpire Al Barlick. He said, I'm going to be invited to National League spring training, which is really the first big step. So now I'm eligible to not only work spring training games, but I'm also eligible to be a call-up umpire. And I would do that for 3 years, and it was building up to expansion. At that time, there were only 68 major league umpires, and there was going to be expansion because of Colorado and Miami, Florida. And there were a couple retirements, so that meant 6 jobs, which I don't think 6 jobs were ever. And based upon how much I was being used as a fill-in umpire, call-up umpire, I said, I think I have a pretty good chance to be one of the 6. Well, that day came, and I was not announced as one of the six, and so it was kind of the writing was on the wall that to be around as long as I was, and then to not be selected. Chances are they had no use for me, and they probably were going to release me, which I wasn't going to quit. So I worked one more year. Was used extremely, you know, I don't even know. Like up until that point, I might have had 100 days going up and down in the National League, and that third year, I mean, I don't even know. I remember working the last series of the season in Shea Stadium, but I kind of saw that the writing was on the wall, and sure enough, Thanksgiving Eve, I got a call from my then league president, Branch Rickey, and he said, "Phil, I hate to tell you this, the National League is no longer interested in you." I said, "Okay," I kind of sensed that it was coming. And fortunately, I had worked a lot of my call-up games with Jerry Crawford, who was the president of the umpires union at the time. And he said, I've worked with you. I'm not saying you're the greatest umpire to ever come down the pike, but I think that you might have got a raw deal, and I'm going to see what we can do to get your job back. And I said, I'm pulling for you. And 3 years went by. And because in that time, there was an umpire strike, there was a player strike. My situation, talk about being on the back burner, I wasn't even on the stove. So it wasn't until the third year, and I said, you know what, the union I couldn't be in the union because I wasn't a major league umpire, and I said, you know what, I'm gonna have to just try to put the ball in my own court. And I sat down over the weekend. I was working at the Short Hills Hilton. My sister had worked there, and it was just before Christmas time. And she said, "Listen, she knew that I was just kind of piddling around, and I was depressed. It was really a low point of my life, my career for sure." And she said, "The hotel is going to be hiring for the holiday. Why don't you come and work for me?" And I said, "I don't want to be in the hotel business." And she says, "No, no, come on." And my Italian sister, she kind of guilted me into it. I said, "Okay, all right, I'll take the job." So I was like a concierge in the lounge upstairs. And longer story short, uh, I took a weekend and I wrote my life on a page. And I wrote it to also what happened was we were going from one league president to another, from Bill White to Len Coleman. And they approached Bill White and said, "Bill, we think that this guy might have got." He said, I'm a lame duck. I'm not going to touch this." And then in come Len Coleman, and I tried calling him myself. He had no reason to take my call, and he didn't. And finally I said, "I'm going to just write a letter. And I'm going to write a letter to Len Coleman. And I'm saying, okay, if I mail it to New York, what's the chances that he's really going to get it, that he's going to..."
Right.
So I said, I'll have to think about that. I'll find out where he lives. I could wait in his driveway. I can put it in his mailbox, just something that. And so, but that particular day, I put the letter in my pocket to bring it to the Hilton for my big sister to proofread. And as I had the letter with me, I'm going upstairs to the lounge where I worked, and as I'm walking down the hallway, coming at me was I don't know if he was director of sales or he was some director, and we say hello and we pass, and then he's as we both go in opposite directions, he says, "Oh, Phil, wait a minute. I think that the VIP we have checking into the hotel tonight is president of the National League, Len Coleman." I said, "I'm sorry, did you say Len Coleman?" So in my mind, I'm saying the guy had been trying to get on the phone for the
That's
last
insane.
year.
You had to be thinking, what? This was meant to be.
I was thinking divine intervention without any question. So I said, "Okay." So now my mind is racing. It's going, and so I go upstairs. I worked like from 3 to 11 in the lounge, and I go upstairs and I call the front desk and I said, "I understand that we're going to have a VIP coming in today, Mr. Leonard Coleman." I said, "Could you have the desk call me when he checks in?" And here, now it's the longest day that I worked there, and all of a sudden, around 10 o'clock or so, maybe 10:30, phone rings, and it's a front desk. He said, Phil, I just see a note here that you wanted to be called when Mr. Coleman checked in. He just checked in. He's in the gift shop. Looks like he's buying a newspaper. Okay. What room will he be in? She tells me the room number. I said, I'm going to give him time to get settled. Here's my plan. I'm going to give him time to get settled. I'm going to knock on the door. He's going to open the door. I'm going to hand him the letter, and I know wherever it goes,
He's
I
going to
know
think he's being served.
I know he's going to have it, right? Well, God, they say, laughs at your plans, right? So I wait. I give him a little time. I knock on the door, and I hear him in the shower. And he says, yeah, who is it? I said, that wasn't my plan. I didn't think I had a speaking part other than to just hand him the letter. So now he said, yeah, who is it? I said, Mr. Coleman, I have a letter for you here. He said, a letter? Just slip it under the door. Okay, I can do that, but I was told I should really hand deliver it. Okay, come back in 20 minutes. I go back in 20 minutes. I knock on the door. Nothing. I said he couldn't have known that it was me, and he took off. But I listened. I put my ear next to the door. I hear him snoring. So he fell asleep. I said, okay, all right, what am I going to do for plan B? For a split second, I thought, and I said, well, if I pull the fire alarm in this hotel, he has to come out. I'll walk with him. I'll hand him a letter, introduce myself, and I'll walk with him down the stairs. I'll be able to say whatever I want. And then I said, that's probably not a good idea. I shouldn't do that. So I said, but I know he's going to get the letter if I slip it under the door. So I kissed the letter, I put it under the door, and I called down to the front desk. I said, does Mr. Coleman have a wake-up call tomorrow morning? They said, yes, he does. He has a 6 o'clock, 6:30, whatever it was, wake-up call. I went home. I knew I hardly slept. I put, instead of my uniform suit on, I put on my best suit, and I went back in front of his door at 6 o'clock in the morning. I heard him rustling around in there, so I knew I didn't miss him. All of a sudden, a little while later, the door opens, and Len Coleman was a pretty big guy. So he's got a smile on his face. And I said, good morning, Mr. Coleman. He said, good morning. I said, Mr. Coleman, pardon the ambush, but I'm Phil Cuzzi. And the smile dropped off his face. I said, no, I work here. I'm not stalking you. I said, but did you get a chance to read my letter? He said, I did read your letter, and I know your story. He said, I've gotten phone calls about you. I want to, because in my letter I said, I've been to umpire school 4 times. I'll go back a 5th time, and I just want to get back into the game. And he said, I know your story. I know you went to umpire school 4 times. Why would you want to go back a 5th time? I said, truth be told, I don't want to go back a 5th time. But if that's what it'll take for me to prove to you that this is how bad I want this job, I'll do it. So he says, walk with me. He was there because it was the All-Star game in Philly that year, and he was hosting the Japanese professional league president and contingency. He says, they're having breakfast now. Walk with me. Let me just tell them what time we're leaving. So I had the opportunity to walk with him downstairs, back upstairs, and say everything that at that point I felt as though I'm really kind of running out of options. My league.
And what was going through your head during the walk? What your mind must have been racing?
My mind was certainly racing, and I just, I'm going by the letter, and I'm saying, I said to him, Mr. Coleman, I said, I use the analogy of the movie Heaven Can Wait, if you remember that movie, and there's a couple different versions, but I was talking about the newest one, which is still old now, with Warren Beatty. And I said, Mr. Coleman, you're familiar with the movie Heaven Can Wait? Warren Beatty knew that he just wasn't supposed to be there. I said, I'm not supposed to be here. I truly believe I'm supposed to be working for you. And he looked at me and he said, I'll tell you what, after the season's over, I'll call you. And I thought he was gracious, and he listened to everything I had to say. He answered any question I had, and not that I had a lot of them. It was me just trying to sell the idea that I wanted to come.
Sure.
Back. And and I'm saying, well, he was being so gracious, but now he's kind of giving me the polite brush, telling me he's going to call me. So I said, Well, Mr. Coleman, I know that you are much more busy than I am. Let me call you. He says, no, I'll call you. I said, but, and he stopped me and he glared me right in the eye. He said, I told you I'll call you. And I said, and when he said that, I believed him, number one. And number two, I was at peace because I said, there's not one other thing that I can do. The opportunity I just had is above and beyond my expectation. I never.
Right, and the last thing you wanted to do was send him off in the other direction, since he's telling you, he's giving you his word. Whether you have to hope he's being honest.
And the way he looked at me, I did believe him. And sure enough, a day or two after the World Series that year, he called me, and he said,
And what year is this again, Phil?
the year would have been 95, maybe 5, 6. I think it was 95.
Who was in the World Series? Because that was Atlanta. That was Atlanta. Was it Atlanta, Cleveland?
Whatever,
95.
whatever year.
96 was Yankees, Braves.
I don't remember who. I remember Eddie Montague worked the Game 7 in the World Series that year, but whatever year the All-Star Game was in Philly, it would have been, that following season.
Okay.
And he said to me, I just want you to know that I am going against every recommendation of every lawyer that works for MLB. He said, they feel as though if I do this, I am setting a precedent, and every guy who ever gets released will be knocking at my door. But I really think it's a feel-good story, and I'm going to do it. But there is a caveat. I wasn't going to be able to start where I ended. He said, you have to agree to, you don't have to go back to umpire school. You do have to go back to the evaluation course, and you'll have to spend a year in A-ball, a year in AA, and a year in AAA. No, it was 97 was the year. And he said, no guarantee other than I will guarantee that you'll be treated fairly. And you have to sign on it. I said, give me the pen, I'll sign. So here I am, I'm 40 at this point, going back to A-ball. But that was my journey, and it was hard. It was very gratifying, and it was certainly worth the trouble for sure.
And you've umped World Series, playoffs, wild card games, All-Star games. You got the last game at the old or the refurbished Yankee Stadium, right? In 2000. How was that night?
Yeah, I mean, that was great. I worked the All-Star game at Yankee Stadium, which was a thrill, growing up there. And
you were a Yankee fan, weren't you, growing up, or no?
I was a Yankee and Met fan. I was a New York fan, and I appreciated the differences of both leagues. So it was just a question of, this was my home, and like every other kid, every umpire comes from somewhere. So who comes from St. Louis? They grew up a Cardinal fan, and so on. But it was just it was just such a, like I said, I don't think anybody has had the journey that I've had. People have
and
had.
For the audience, you were born in Newark, you were raised and grew up in Belleville, and then settled in Nutley, right? Just
Yeah.
so yeah.
I grew up in Belleville, went to high school in Belleville, junior high in Belleville, and then met my wife in junior high at Belleville, and then we moved all the way over to Nutley, and the town of our arch rival.
But going back to the Yankees, so you not only did the All-Star game, but then you did the first game at the new Yankee Stadium, right?
Yes. Yeah.
That was against, I remember, I think it was against Cleveland.
It was against Cleveland. Yeah. Yeah.
And what do you think of the new stadium versus the refurbished and the old Yankee Stadium? A lot of the diehard Yankee fans do not prefer it.
Yeah, I mean, it was kind of like just a newer version of the older stadium. The old stadium, and I had a chance to work there, even though I came up National League, so I never in the beginning got a chance to go to Yankee Stadium. But when the leagues merged, the umpires merged in, I guess it was 2000. I think it was 2000, 2001. Then I got to go to both. So I worked in old Yankee Stadium as well, and it was kind of neat to work in the old stadium as because when we came in, we parked in the players' lot, and then we went into that press gate, which was directly across that little street, and when you walk down the stairs to get to our clubhouse, the hallway was so narrow, and they kind of bend and wound, and you always knew when George Steinbrenner was in the house because at every bend they had a security guard. When he wasn't there, it wasn't as much, but it was just it was to think about it, to say Babe Ruth walked through this corridor, the same corridor. Lou Gehrig
Right.
walked through the same corridor, and to think about that, it was really very nostalgic to me, especially having grown up here. And
Did you have to deal with Steinbrenner? With his
no,
moaning and groaning about calls or anything?
I no, I met him um, my first year back because I was in the Florida State League and I worked in Tampa, and I was, he was, if he saw any umpires coming or going, he saw these young guys, 20 years old, lugging a duffel bag. I had my Priestmeyer case that we had from the big leagues, and I'm 40, and he kind of saw me walking in with this thing. I was by myself, and he stopped me. He said, "Excuse me, who are you?" I introduced myself, and he was very nice about it. I told him, who I was and where I was from, and he couldn't have been nicer.
How, was there a difference? I know that with the American and National League umpires, was there a big difference back in the day? I mean, I know you had to wear you wore your protector and everything else, but you tell the audience, the younger audience, what the difference was.
Yeah, the difference, not for me or for my contemporaries, but back in the day, as you said, when if they remember that the American League umpires used to wear the outside protector, the balloon as they were known, and the National League umpires wore the inside protector, which by the time I started, even my first time at umpire school, you were not allowed to wear the balloon. So the difference was, and I always heard this growing up. Oh, the National League umpires call the low strike, and the American League umpires call the high strike, and that wasn't because it was necessarily by design. It was because the National League umpires were able to more similar to how we work now. They're in the slot area, which is the area between the hitter and the catcher, and you're able to get lower, so you could see the lower pitch better. Whereas the American League umpires back in the day, they wore the balloon and they worked directly behind the catcher's head, so they weren't necessarily able to see as well the lower pitch. So in turn, I guess they didn't call it because they didn't see it as well, and that's where I believe that became. We're saying National League umpire low strike, American high. So, but when I started, everybody was trained the same way.
Right. Okay. Fast forward. We'll go to 2009. You know where I'm going. Yankees Twins.
Okay,
Game two.
lowest point of my career
Why?
because I missed the play in the biggest stage that I had ever been on at that time, and that's a perfect example. If there were a replay at that time, you wouldn't even have brought it up.
But at the time, what did you see? If you tell the fans what happened, it was an extra innings, right? The Yankees had already won the first game, and it was I guess Joe Mauer was leading off in extra innings, and he thought he had a double, and you called it foul. And I think the ball hit Melky Cabrera, if my memory serves me right. And then I remember there was a long pause still on what that was, and the conclusion was though that it was fair.
It was fair because Cabrera did touch the ball in fair territory, and not this is not an excuse because, as I say, this was the low point of my career. Not really used to working a six-man system, so I was working down the left field line. So I kind of like a fish out of water. The truth of the matter is, when I saw the ball coming, I took my eye at some point off the ball and I focused on the field at where I thought the striking point was going to be. And because I was looking at the line, on the line where I thought the striking point was going to be, I didn't see what happened over here, which is where Cabrera touched the ball. After he touched the ball, the next place that the ball hit was in foul territory, which I saw and then bounced into the stands.
And,
So
and And to be someone who's a big Yankee fan, I've been to the stadium a bunch of times. To be fair to you, and then we can take it from there. Is that I don't know if everybody knows, left field in Yankee Stadium is very narrow where the foul line, and the stands meet. You don't have that much room, and also with the crowd noise and everything. Tell me what was going through your head if you don't even hear that noise when a play like that is happening in the moment.
Yeah, no, you don't hear the noise. And like I said, the only thing I was focused on is seeing where the ball was going to hit the ground. So I'm just thinking about, and really, it was, I missed the most important part was that it hit Milky Cabrera's glove.
Well,
But
my memory escapes me. Did you guys confab after that and just to
no,
say, "Hey, buddies, give me"? Why not?
it didn't happen. I mean, to this day, I ask myself, did the third base umpire not see it? Did the home plate umpire see something different? I mean, any umpire could have seen that it may have hit Cabrera's glove, but
So was it a case that you were just so sure that you got it right that in other words you didn't even bother to think of
oh,
asking, or you
well,
couldn't ask?
at the time, we could certainly get together on it, but I didn't think anything of it. I thought I got the play right. So the only way it would have happened is if somebody would have came out, towards me, or if a manager. I mean, I don't think any of the. I don't think that. Well, I don't know whoever was it was Tom Kelly. No, if it was Tom Kelly managing Minnesota at that time. No one from the Twins. If someone would have came out to argue, I may have then gone to like at least the closest to me would have been the third base umpire.
Right.
I might have said, "Hey, did you see something that I didn't see?" But nobody reacted any differently until people saw the replay.
Yeah, I mean to be honest with you, I don't. I mean it was a mistake, but I don't think that was going to catapult the Twins to the Yankees were just the team in 2009. And but did you ever reach out? How long before you reached out to say, "Hey, my bad on that"? I don't.
No, I mean, we knew as soon as we got into the locker room that people saw it on replay and all that. But I mean, if my memory serves me, Joe Mauer still got on base. It wasn't like and the nice thing about it, it may have been. I don't know if it was. It might have been Gardenhire who was the manager at that time
Yeah, it
because
was. It was Ron Gardenhire.
yeah, because here's the nice thing about that. And I took a lot of heat for that. And that was, I was even punished, without them saying why I was being punished. But I didn't work another postseason game after that for I don't it might have been 5 years. I mean it was 3, 4, 5 years. And but the nicest thing that happened to me with that whole situation was when I worked spring training the next year, I had the Twins in Clearwater, and the way the setup was there, we came out of our room, double door, like down a corridor, and then we made a right onto the field. The left was the visiting team locker room, and as we were coming down the hallway, Ron Gardenhire was waiting for me. And he said, "Phil, I just want to talk to you." He said, "I want you to know, I know you took a lot of heat for that call." He said, "We know who you are. We know that you work hard. It was a mistake. You did not cause my team to lose that game." He said, "We had every chance after that. And, what could you say except thank you, and I appreciate you saying so." Because it was, I mean, that was a low point in my career.
I mean, if that was the low point, the high point had to be 2017, being behind home plate for Game One of one of the greatest World Series ever, the Astros and the Dodgers.
Yeah, that's certainly, every person who is, between the lines is working to get to the World Series. Umpires, players, coaches, trainers, it doesn't matter who. Even if whoever the official scorer is for a particular team, he wants to get to the World Series. He wants to be the scorer for the World Series game, and it certainly was the highlight of my career. My first game ever in the big leagues was certainly a highlight in my career. But there's nothing like the World Series
Well, you must
postseason.
have had you must have had butterflies, and then you're looking around. You got a packed stadium. It's an international event, and then Chris Taylor hits a home run on the first pitch.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, of course you have butterflies, no question about it. And then after the first pitch, after the first couple pitches, then you say, okay, here comes the game, and that kind of disappears. You still never lose track of sight of the fact that it's a different game. I mean, it's the World Series. Postseason, same thing. But really, once you settle in and see a couple of pitches, then you're just doing your job.
And also, besides being a classic 7 game series, 2 years later, it came out that the Astros were cheating and stealing signs and everything. But I'll tell you, as a Yankee fan, and they beat the Yankees, if you remember, 4-3 in the ALCS. I honestly never felt, even if they were, I always thought it kind of gamesmanship, even though it went to the, ridiculous. I always thought the Yankees scored like a total of 4 or 5 runs in the series in Houston, that entire series, and Houston was the better team. And the Dodgers complained that look at the beatings that Darvish and that Kershaw took in 2 of the games. But Darvish didn't pitch well the entire series, whether in LA or Houston. What is your take on that whole scandal? A, I mean, it's been confirmed that they cheated, but B, did you think that really, that there should be an asterisk in the, if they won the World Series?
Well, I mean, to say asterisk, then then you could go down the list. If you open that door, then you're going to have to put a lot of asterisks in the game for a lot of different things. But the biggest question was after that, and then when people knew that I had worked that series in 17. They said, "Did you know? Did you hear banging on the garbage can?" And the answer is no. I don't. I know, speaking for myself, but I never heard another umpire say, "Hey, something don't sound right." I never heard any of that. So, and again, we're not focused on any of that. Like you asked me about, do you hear the fans? We really don't. You just hear noise, and that's energy. That's why the year of COVID, when the guys had to work with no fans. I don't know how they did it because, everybody thrives on the energy, and there just was none.
But do you feel that Houston was the best team and the best team won overall, despite the cheating confirmations?
Yeah, I mean, I can't, I don't even think about it. I don't even, I could care less who wins. If someone cheated, then you say, well, then they shouldn't have won. Now, if you could still argue to say, well, even despite that they cheated, they were still the best team, but they
Right.
cheated. I mean, a cheater shouldn't prosper. Isn't that the way the saying goes?
Yeah, but and then you had that incredible game 5, that 13-12 game. I mean, the Dodgers clubbed there were so many home runs clubbed. It was a wild back and forth. I thought this latest World Series was the greatest World Series I've ever seen, to be honest with
It
you.
was. It was a well played game. Two good teams, and it was unbelievable. It was a great series. And again, that's even if you're not a fan of whoever is playing, all you want to do is see a good game. And that's the same thing for umpiring. We want to go out. We want to do the best job that we can. We want to be right for everything, and we just want to see a good game. We want to see, we don't want to see errors. We don't want to see sloppy play. We want to just see a well pitched game, and that's just, and the average fan, I think, feels the same way.
Who had the best batting eye in baseball while you were umpiring in the major leagues? To you, who had the best batting eye?
Tony Gwynn comes to mind. I think that he was one of the purest hitters that I've ever seen. Overall, these guys are good. Are some guys better than others? Of course. Are some umpires better than others? Absolutely. Are some trainers better than other trainers? Naturally. These guys are good when it comes to hitting, but off the top of my head, you ask me a question like that, I say Tony Gwynn was probably one of the most purest hitters that I've seen.
How about Barry Bonds?
Barry Bonds, I had him when I first started out, and I mean, he was just a power hitter. I saw him hit a home run at Yankee Stadium when I was umpiring. He hit it in the upper.
I had tickets to that game and didn't go. I know which game you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah. But I remember one time we were in Montreal. I was working third, and I think it was Martinez. I think was pitching, and there was a hit by, they thought it was intentionally thrown at a hitter, and the bench is empty, and Bonds comes running past me, and like just as a reaction, I put my hand out to try to stop him, and it was like like my hand was a gate because he went. It was like a block of steel just running past me. But
Well, you worked that series, right? Obviously, that's that when he hit that blast in the upper tank.
he may have done it more than once, but I know he did it when I was there. Yeah.
Because on that Sunday, if I remember correctly, was the only time that Mariano faced Bonds, and he struck him out on a 3-2 pitch. And I can remember the tension about seeing, the great pitcher against the great hitter like that. And everybody wanted to see and he challenged him on 3-2, and he struck him out on a high fastball. And like those are the incredible moments that sticks with you, even if the game didn't determine at the moment, a title or anything like that. What's your take on the steroids era from the standpoint of, I mean, you saw these guys, like you said, you saw Bonds. You see him one moment looking lean and mean, and he was always going to be a Hall of Famer. And then the next minute, he looks like the Michelin tire man. Or you see Giambi and these guys ballooning. Well, you guys you guys must have chatted in the locker rooms. It's like, or you just lived in the moment. What was the deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, the person that stands out in my mind the most was Sammy Sosa. I had Sammy in AAA in Oklahoma City when he was with Texas, and he was a lean, in shape player. And then I remember seeing him in the big leagues. His neck was like this, but maybe it was just me. I wasn't thinking to say, "Oh, he's got to be taking steroids." I just, again, it's
Yeah, I think we all wrote it off to nutrition and training and everything else and kind of went with it. Now, in retrospect, you look back at it, it's like, how couldn't, and, nobody really made a big stink about it until those writers
of course.
wrote the book and they saw the creatine, and which is legal now anyway, for Mark McGuire.
Mm, yeah.
Um, Also, who's the biggest complainer that you dealt with in the on balls and strikes?
Um, Not limited to balls and strikes, but I would say Ozzie Guillen was the biggest complainer, and more than complainer, because a lot of people complain. But if I were to say to you, what manager do you think that all of the umpires would have disliked the most? You might say Bobby Cox, because he was ejected
More than
more
anybody.
than anybody else. But Bobby Cox was fair. And he got ejected when he wanted to get ejected, and then he forgot about it. Ozzie Guillen, on the other hand, when he got ejected, he blasted you in the paper. I never saw, he blasted his own players in the
Right, he went on a campaign. He was known to.
Yeah. So, from an umpire's point of view, we just want players, managers, coaches, we just want that they can get angry and they can get ejected, and that's part of the game, and that's okay. They know what they could do. We know what we need to do. But you just want someone to be fair. And I don't think Ozzy was fair.
Was there ever an intimidation factor on some level, or like if you were punching out a guy like a Tony Gwynn, and he on a take, say and you're like, well, that's Tony Gwynn. If he thinks it's a ball, like, does that ever weigh like the rookie? It's got to bleed into you, human.
Yeah.
As far as, do you second guess? Well, Wade Boggs just took, or on a 3-2, how tough is it on a borderline? I know it's split second, but if Tony Gwynn's up there versus Joe Palooka, the rookie, you
Yeah.
might be a little quicker to punch him out.
Well, you would think that it would be that way, but I'll tell you the reason that it's not. Because again, our job is to get every pitch right. So I can't worry about who's standing in front of me with a bat in his hand. And by if I'm afraid to call a strike on Tony Gwynn or on, Barry Bonds, what about the pitcher that I just
Sure.
so that's why our job is to be down the middle and just trying to be fair and run the game the way it's supposed
Which pitcher was the biggest complainer of that he's not getting calls?
to. The one who's not throwing strikes.
Oh, come on, Phil. Give me somebody.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm telling you, I'm trying to think who was the pitcher that he pitched for Seattle. He pitched for the Phillies. He threw a big breaking ball. Uh,
Jamie Moyer.
Jamie Moyer, who was a great guy, and one night I was in Philly and he's throwing that breaking ball and it's landing on the ground and he wants it as a strike, and you can tell he's getting frustrated. There was a little scribbler up the first base line, and he comes over to the catcher comes up. I'm coming up because I'm working the bump, to call it, and he said, "Phil, those pitches aren't any good." I said, "Jamie, the pitches are on the ground. I can't call that pitch a strike." And I forget who the catcher was. Jamie Moore knocked on the door after the game. He said, "Hey, Phil," he says, I looked at the video and really, and who would the catcher have been? I don't remember. He told me to shut the F up, right? And he said, but yeah, I don't know if Lester comes to mind. John Lester comes to mind. Anytime you have a guy, no matter what he throws, he thinks it's a strike, there's going to be issues because everything he throws was not a strike. Yeah, he comes to my mind, but otherwise, somebody who may be, having just, everybody, we all struggle.
The two of you quickly talk about. It was funny. The two things that is the Scherzer ejection and the Gardner ejection, because Brett Gardner was a real character in the famous where he's with the bat in the
Yeah.
in the dugout. You ejected him. What year was that? Do you remember roughly? It was I think a couple of guys were tossed.
Yeah, CC went also. I mean, I don't know. It wasn't Garner's last year because I know I saw him in spring training the year after that. But yeah, I don't remember what year that was.
And how's is Boone fun to deal with, or he's a great impersonator, so he has that kind of streak that people don't always see. The umpires see it more than the fans in the press conferences because he's boring in the press conferences. He's more animated with the umps.
When you say impersonator, who does he impersonate?
He impersonates the swings of different people. He'll impersonate Joe Torre's walk out to the mound. Sometimes the umpires. He's a little bit of a prankster. But I want to know how it is in dealing with ball because he gets tossed a lot for balls and strikes too.
Yeah, I mean, and so that shouldn't happen this year, I guess, because now with the challenge system, so he may not, he may turn out that he doesn't like it because he's not going to have much to yell about, unless of course he loses his challenges, like I mentioned earlier, and now come the seventh, eighth inning, he thinks that there's a pitch that he can no longer challenge.
And sometimes those ejections are obviously trying to motivate your own team, and you're going to lose that aura or that component to the game too. So that's a tool that the manager is not going to have. And you must know sometimes where what the motivation is for the manager, whether they're really pissed off or whether this is totally a ploy to jumpstart their own team.
Absolutely, that happened. To me in Baltimore with Buck Showalter, who I had Buck Showalter in 1985 in Oneonta, New York. He was his first year managing and was my first year umpiring, and but fast forward to Baltimore, I call his runner out at third base, and I probably missed the call. I think I missed the call, and he came out to argue. And he said, "All right, first he was, just saying, you sure you had a good look at that? No, I felt like I saw it, Buck. Yeah, no, he was out." And he said, "Okay, so here's what's going to happen. I'm going to stand here for a little while longer. And I'm going to start jumping up and down. I'm going to look like I'm really angry, and then you're going to eject me, and then I'm going to just stay a little while longer and just yell a little bit more, and then I'm going to turn and walk away." I said, "Okay." And that's it.
Oh, God. So just a quick, how about can you just tell me the Scherzer ejection? I read the accounts of that. I couldn't stop laughing about how sticky he was. It was in 2023, I think it was against the Dodgers.
In LA, yeah. Yeah, so we started checking uh, randomly. So it could be when they come off the field, on the field. It was our discretion when we wanted to check a pitcher, and he came off the field and his glove and his hand were a little bit sticky, and I said, "Listen, you're gonna go in, wash your hands off, because I'm gonna check you when you come." I warned him. I said, "Listen, when you come out, I'm gonna check you again. And, I'm gonna check your hands. I'm gonna check the glove." He came out. His hands were clean, and the glove was very, very sticky. I said, "You can't use this glove." And and it was when Buck came out. Uh, I said, "Buck, would you like to see this glove?" He said, "No, no, I don't want to see it." So he wouldn't touch it. He didn't want to have to say, "Yeah, it was sticky," but it was.
So Buck really enjoyed. He must have been one of your favorite people in the game because he looked like he had a ball and was serious at the same time.
Buck was a serious guy. He was a good guy, and he was a fair guy. And again, that's to my point. You just want a guy again. He was when he was in Baltimore. I had the plate, and he started yelling. He didn't yell all the game, but he yelled about a particular pitch that he thought was not low, and it was a strike. And then the next day, we have a rain situation. Tom Hallion was the crew chief, but we went into his office just to say, "Hey, this is the weather that we're hearing." And I don't remember if we're saying, we're probably not going to be able to play, whatever the case was. And he listened to us and he said, "Okay, well, if we can't play, we can't play." And then he said, "Phil, by the way, that was a good pitch yesterday." I said, "Well, then why are you yelling at me?" But yeah, he was a regular guy. He was fair. He was just a fair guy.
And
Knowledgeable.
quick, and finally, a couple of quick, like hit and run type questions. Are we going to have baseball in 2027 or not?
That's a good question. If I were a betting man, I would say there's a very good chance that there may be a stoppage, but what do I know?
Favorite movie?
Godfather 1 and 2.
Favorite actor?
Favorite actor? Steve Sharippa.
From The Sopranos. Favorite actress?
Natalie Wood.
Favorite restaurant?
Oh, that's a tough question. Give me a city, I'll give you a restaurant.
Is that one of the perks of being an umpire? One of the you probably could write a book on every restaurant in every major league city.
Yeah, along with that, one of the biggest perks of this job is the people that I've met over the years for the last 27 years, and just the relationships that we cultivated over the years. It could have been a restaurant owner, it could have been a bartender, it could have been a GM of a hotel, it could have been a security guard at one of the stadiums, because it's always the same people for the most part. Now in the latter years, personnel changed a lot, but we see the same security guards at Dodger Stadium since I remember going there. Back in the old days, Shea Stadium, same security guards, and that was a perk of the job, getting to know those people.
And finally, I'd be remiss if I just didn't mention this final thing that you are, something that's near and dear to you. You founded the Robert Luongo ALS Fund in 2003 after your childhood friend, Robert Luongo. If you could just mention briefly about that.
Yeah, so we talked about the long journey it took me to get to the big leagues, and when I finally got there, it was my wife Gilda who said, "It took you a long time to get here. You really have to give something back now." And I said, "Yeah, no, you're right." And I said, what will I do? Should I go to children's hospitals, visit? What should I do? And then no sooner did that, happen, that I got a call from, you said my childhood friend. We went to different grammar schools, but we went to the same junior high. We were actually almost like cousins because his mother's sister married my mother's brother. So we weren't really first cousins, but we had the same first cousins. And so we grew up together. And he called me one day and he said, "Something's going on. My hand is numb and now I feel it's starting to go up my arm." And I said, Rob, you go to the doctor, just maybe, who knows what it is, and maybe they could stop it, and fast forward a short time after that, he said, I was just been given a death sentence. I was diagnosed with ALS.
Ugh.
And, to see this guy who was, the captain of our football team, he was an all-group linebacker, and to see what this disease took everything from him except the movement of his eyes, and that's what ALS does. And so I started that, and it was just going to be to help his daughter, to go to college and all.
Right.
But then it grew so far beyond that I could never have imagined I would never have had the expectation of where we are today. We didn't know what we were doing on the first dinner that we started to raise money for ALS, and now we just finished our 22nd year. We have over 600 people come to Nanita's in the Park in Belleville. It's the same people from the community, and over those years, we raised over $1 million, and we give to scholarships to kids. We give ALS research. Last year we gave away $100,000 in research. This year we gave away just a little bit under that, and patient care.
And I know you also helped out with one of my friends who throws a fundraiser every year. He just did it February 28th. It's called the Nips Ahoy Polar Plunge, also for ALS. So
Yeah.
I'll attach that with the podcast, if the link, if anybody wants to donate. But thank you so much for being so generous with your time, Phil, and I hope to see you down the road.
My pleasure, Dean.
Thank you very much.
Great job, y'all.